Forgotten But Unbroken is a World War II turn-based tactics game that mirrors modern XCOM in a lot of ways. A ragtag team of soldiers, a splash of base management, and overwhelming odds. But while the foundation may be similar, this is really not your typical turn-based strategy game, including some interesting design decisions that I think may divide players a little bit. This video will discuss all of those things in detail, and by the end, you'll know if Forgotten But Unbroken is a game worth your time. Set in Central Europe during World War II, beginning with the German invasion of Russia, Forgotten But Unbroken has a clear focus on historical events, characters, and realistic gameplay, with beautifully designed maps and set pieces that really reflect the era. You'll see this immediately from the main menu, which shows actual newspaper headlines from the time. Following the main character's story through the war, you'll command a small group of soldiers running special missions helping the Allied effort. I've seen it asked a lot, so I'll just say it now. There is no German campaign. Real-life characters, settings, and stories have been carefully selected to create the experience and add a lot of depth alongside the gameplay. Speaking of the gameplay, you're going to see a lot of XCOM World War II thrown around, however, that really doesn't do it justice. There are definitely similarities, good and bad, that I'll get to, but what makes Forgotten But Unbroken stand out? Veterans of the genre will get comfortable quickly with the standard movement, attack, action point, and cover systems, but underneath all of that, there's a lot at work here. Characters not only have one of 6 classes, health and action points, but also individual skills, traits, and attributes you can level up that play into specific actions not only in combat, but also in camp, which I'll discuss next. There's even some effects from which faction of the Allied forces they come from, alongside a morale and will system, meaning poor morale or camp conditions contribute to your soldiers being more prone to panic in battle. In addition, the weapon familiarity mechanic means the more a soldier uses the same weapon, the better they will become with it. But the reverse is also true. Penalties can apply for switching to weapons that a soldier is not familiar with, and the condition of your weapons, if not maintained at the armory, will deteriorate and cause problems too. Each class has its own skill tree with some overlapping basic and passive skills, but mostly specialized ones. Medics heal, snipers snipe, and heavy gunners can remove some of the huge penalties for using heavy weapons. Unfortunately, there is no renaming or customizing of your characters outside of assigning classes to some of the new recruits. And as for permadeath, any soldiers lost are lost forever, with the exception of the main characters that will immediately fail missions if killed. This can put you in a little bit of a weird spot sometimes, especially if you're an aggressive player.
If he dies, he dies.
But moving on from the soldier management, let's talk about the base. This is a big part of Forgotten But Unbroken, so there's a lot of information here. Your primary resources are going to be food and medicine, as obviously your troops need to eat, but running out of medicine will mean that any diseases can't be cured, as well as health points not recovering for any injured soldiers. It's bad news. Building materials like steel, fabric, and wood are needed to construct new facilities, however, these are very limited. The only way to get most of them is doing a warehouse raid mission, which are few and far between. This means that early on, you'll only be able to build a couple of things, and since the hospital is a necessity, those options whittle down further. After using resources to upgrade the basics of the camp, like adding showers and latrines to fight off disease, you'll be left with enough for maybe a kitchen or another upgrade. There is definitely not an abundance of resources, so choices do matter. Here's the kicker though. Random camp events happen, and you will lose resources and food to rodents, thieves, and traitors. So that kitchen you wanted to build after the hospital was done, now you don't have enough steel for it. This really reinforces the underdog and ragtag nature of your soldiers, and is a recurring theme in Forgotten But Unbroken. Choices will matter, mistakes will be punished, and things will happen that you couldn't possibly predict. The situation can get dire very quickly. You can radio the separate allied countries for reinforcements, resources, or ammo and weapons, but their willingness to help will depend on the strength of your relationship, which is grown by completing missions for them. It's far from a sure thing. Another layer of camp management is assigning staff to buildings, which they need to function, but only qualified soldiers can do. Only a doctor can staff the hospital, for example. Only a radio man can staff the HQ and call your allies for help. This can easily get complicated though. If your radio man is injured and in the hospital recovering, he won't be making any calls for you. Are you seeing the depth of all this yet? There is one more way to get wood and food. In between missions, you can choose to send out small or large expeditions to hunt or cut wood. This is where those attributes and traits come into play, as certain ones will help or hurt your chance of success. You heard that right. Chance of success means it's no sure thing. And actually, the percentages are pretty low. I'm gonna be honest here. Failing 3 hunting expeditions in a row when you're about to run out of food really doesn't feel good. Couple that with the allies being unwilling to help this week, and there's pretty much nothing you can do. I haven't even talked about the wintertime, where you can't do any missions for months, so no new building materials, and it basically turns into Frostpunk, fighting to keep cold, starvation, and disease at bay. In my game, I never had the resources to build stoves, so morale tanked, disease flared up, and some of my soldiers deserted. Completely understandable outcome, but again, with no missions for months, there's no upgrades, no resources, and really nothing you can do but watch. I actually started the game over because I thought that maybe I missed something, but the first time I ran out of medicine, and the second I ran out of food. This is just the punishing nature of Forgotten But Unbroken, and it ties directly into mechanics that I think could turn some players off. There is a heavy random element here, and at times a distinct feel of lack of player control. Forgotten But Unbroken has no selectable difficulty or changeable settings for any of those aspects. Low percentage expeditions and the random chance at allied support can mean that you fail many times in a row to acquire needed resources, or those resources you had plans for get swiped and you won't get another warehouse mission to replenish them anytime soon. This doesn't always feel great, and for the less hardcore players may feel downright awful. Pacing is actually very slow, for better or worse, even in combat, which I'll get to next, and you won't get bombarded with missions. There's maybe 2 a month. This leads to a lot of downtime spent in camp, but with no resources to build additional buildings, it's mostly just healing, hunting, and woodcutting early on. When winter comes, if you haven't got the resources or managed to upgrade certain aspects of camp, you're in for a rough time. However, that random factor extends to combat as well, with the familiar hit chance percentage system rearing its head. This means that you will indeed get 95% chance misses, and some elite enemies have perks that can make a 100% chance miss too. Line of sight is used as the basis here, but sometimes that system, as it's known to do, can feel a little off as well. Not only that, but any class of soldier other than a medic attempting to heal or bandage has a 50% chance of failure. It's a coin flip. Guns will jam when in poor condition, and sometimes when not. I even had a gun jam on me 3 turns in a row. With no resources to build an armory and maintain my weapons at camp though, it was kind of the hand I was dealt. Hit percentages are generally pretty low to begin with, even for some flanking shots. Angles and positioning definitely matter and make a difference though, as well as a character's dexterity stat and familiarity with their weapon. Taking all of this into account means that one bad turn can really torpedo your squad, or your best laid plans can go completely off the rails. You will be punished for reckless tactics in the face of overwhelming odds. If the RNG doesn't deter you though, there are some great additions here to help you even those odds. Every mission will start concealed, and you'll have the chance to whittle down the enemy forces through stealth kills and sneaking up behind them. The thing is, you won't always know where enemies are or where they're looking, and they can have a tendency to just pop up if you rush around. Patience really is the key, and in a way, this phase reminds me of the old Commandos games. You'll watch and wait for the enemy patrol, then take them down when their back is turned and the time is right. Of course, you can always just rush in and skip this, but the stealth phase really seems designed to help you maximize your chances in the coming battle, and you're gonna need it. The enemies are plentiful, and new, tougher variants like officers that put fear in your troops will appear pretty regularly. Each type of unit has their own tactics, strengths, and weaknesses, which are summarized when you first come across them, something I really like. There's also a nice loot feature with items and supplies scattered around levels or on dead enemies that you can pick up. This can be ammo, med kits, or some intelligence items like documents that you can send to the allied spies. As a side note for quality of life here, I do wish there was an item indicator instead of having to manually hold down a key to find things, and after years of playing these type of games, having no dedicated hotkey for attack or changeable keybinds, plus making the number 1 end a soldier's turn is diabolical. Muscle memory had me skip so many turns before I got used to that. Attacks and movements can be done in any order and really need to be thought out ahead of time. Even though your troops have almost 30 AP, shooting, covering, and overwatch cost a lot, so you have to make small decisive movements and really plan your positioning. The indicators at the bottom of the screen show which actions you can do if you make those moves, which I think is just a nice little heads up feature to have. Spicing up combat a little more, there are also interactive items like mortars and machine gun nests that can be used, although these are more for dedicated missions and not in every one. A defense mission has you manning a heavy machine gun nest, and a convoy ambush gives you a limited supply of mortars, for example. The mission variety and different scenarios as well as the stealth phase help to keep things fresh, and it doesn't feel like you're just playing the same thing over and over again. Considering the slower pace of missions, this makes each one feel more important and impactful overall. The historical aspect and combination of in-game and real-life events makes it feel even more alive, with beautiful maps and set pieces that reflect the World War II era. If you're not a hardcore player though, the punishing nature, its random elements, and no difficulty settings may be enough to put you off of it. It would be nice to have an easier difficulty for those who just want to enjoy the historical events and story more. But at the end of the day, Forgotten But Unbroken is much more than World War II XCOM, and as a turn-based tactics challenge, I can recommend to any fan looking to really test their limits. For more of my turn-based tactics games reviews and breakdowns, click the playlist of videos on screen now.